Good afternoon. I'm Cynthia Runge, and I am the owner of Peridot Family Law, which is a full-service family law firm in Boston. And today we are doing our quarterly Zoom, and the theme is all about kids. And I'm very fortunate today to have two wonderful panelists, Kelly Walsh and Monica Wisco, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about them. Kelly is the artistic director and owner of the New England School of Performing Arts, which is a new 501c3 dedicated to providing a fun and all-inclusive professional arts experience for kids of all ages. She also serves as the drama director at the North Andover High School, and she co-founded the Fairy Tale Players, a nonprofit organization dedicated to creating educational theater for young audiences, and has served as the education director of creative arts, where she directed over 30 children's productions and was featured twice in the Boston Parent Best of the Best issue for her theater classes. And I would like to introduce Monica Wisco, a licensed social worker in private practice in Danvers, Mass., where she provides individual and family therapy to all ages, including specializing in children and adolescents. Monica has over 2 decades of experience working with individuals of varied ages and circumstance. She's passionate about working with those who suffer from anxiety, depression, and who have experienced trauma. She has extensive training in these areas. So I want to thank both Monica and Kelly for being here.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having us.
So before we get started, we're going to do some of the sort of more mundane part of the webinar, which is just to let folks know that if you jump on and if you're worried about your name showing up, then you might want to rename yourself. And at the end, we're going to make some time for questions. So we are recording this. We're going to put this on my YouTube site so that other folks can access this material, as well as some of the resources. So just be mindful that if you do ask a question, your voice would be recorded. All right, so all of us on this Zoom today work with families and kids in some capacity. So it's not uncommon for families who are going through divorce to ask me about resources to help kids manage these transition. And as I was thinking about these requests, I thought about the both of you because I know that you have sort of expertise in this area. So just, generally speaking, and to kick things off, Kelly, as the executive director of NESPA, can you tell us a little bit about what NESPA does?
Yes, so NESPA started about 8 years ago, and our main artistic discipline is theater. We do, I would say, 6 or 7 different theater shows per year. And in addition, we do visual arts programs. We do have some dance that's incorporated into our programs. We also do music education. That's part of our shows, but we also do private voice lessons and piano lessons as well. So we try to incorporate all the arts into our programs, but I would say our main discipline is theater for sure.
All right. So since we're talking about the arts and theater, Monica, in your experience, how does play or working in the arts help kids therapeutically?
So, good question, actually. One of the things that we know about expressive arts, play, art, so forth, it gives an outlet for kids, a nonverbal outlet to express themselves through play, communication. It helps with self-discovery. It helps them to be able to learn and process emotional states. It's a good place to teach skills. We understand and see a lot of research on game playing and play in helping to teach. And so just overall, it gives a safe space to explore all of these things and to build confidence, problem-solving skills. I could go on and on about all of the benefits of expressive arts.
So this is a question for both of you. Sometimes a parent, if a kid is going through a really rough time, how can you encourage kids to explore these things?
Well, one thing that we do at NESPA is that I'll see a lot of kids that maybe are being bullied in school. They're having peer problems, or maybe things at home aren't so great. And I think that one thing that we really encourage at NESPA is the free expression and that Monica was talking about. So you can come into the program, and one thing that we really strive to do is to include everyone, to have everyone accepted. So it gives them like a safe space that they can leave all of their worries behind. And when they get there, it's sort of imaginary play where you get to enter another world. You get to be someone that maybe you're not, and don't, you're where you're not bullied or you're not having all of, negative experiences, and you get to be that character. And I think that's what appeals to a lot of kids, that they get to escape for maybe an hour or 2 hours, depending on who they are, from what's happening in their reality, and just to be in a safe world. And also in the classes, you can, depending on the scene, you can let out any emotion that comes. So sometimes there's anger or their fear or whatever they're feeling in that moment. Through that character, they can express it. And I think it's a great way to get these feelings out that maybe they can't go to school and just start expressing anger, for no reason, where at NESPA they can. And I think it does help them feel through feel the feelings, and just kind of release them in a positive way, that there's no repercussions. In fact, it's applauded. It's encouraged to express those feelings. So
It's a good way. I
Monica,
was just thinking while you were saying that, Kelly, it's a good way for them to like process it, try them on, learn what these feelings are, learn what anger really is, and how they express that, how they understand that. I could see
Mhm,
all of that really benefiting
mhm.
learning how to understand their emotional states.
Because even as adults, we can't always express the emotion that we're feeling at a time. So it's a nice way to give them that space where they can do that, and process the feelings. So it's very positive.
Mm.
do parents ever approach either one of you and ask you for like suggestions to, sometimes I would imagine, when you're having summer programs, you might have a kid, get into a theater program because it's kind of daycare. But beyond that, do you ever get approached by people that are saying like, look, I'm really trying to find a way to give my kid an outlet. Do you have any suggestions for how I can start that process or how I can help?
I'll start with that one. I get that question all the time from parents, especially when kids are first coming into therapy. One of the things we start talking about right away is how does this child self-identify? What are some of the interests to start getting them involved in? Because that's a place where they can build confidence and they can learn who they are and they can express.
Mhm.
And that's one of the key things as I start like talking to them about what is available in your area. What is there an interest here? Even if they don't want to be on stage, would there be an interest in art in some way, even helping to create sets or things like that that might not be forefront in the spotlight, but some way that they can be creative and an outlet for them and something that they can build confidence in their own abilities around.
I think that's really helpful. Um, Kelly, you spoke a little bit about this. When we met before, when we were talking about this particular topic of kids, we were talking about what things were like during the pandemic versus now, and I was wondering if you could kind of talk about how things are different.
Yeah. So we stayed open. I think everything started to shut down around March. We went online about 2 weeks later and started teaching theater classes, which was very interesting, on Zoom. And then we returned to the studio in June. So we were active through, the whole pandemic. And what I saw at the beginning is that there definitely was a lot of fear with the kids, a lot of questioning, but really desperately wanting to be together and being with other children.
Mm,
And I had one class in particular that I remember, and this was when we were all masked, and this child, you didn't know like how, we were all 6 feet apart. So it was still in that time where we were still questioning everything. And this one kid was just expressing their feelings and actually broke down, and all they wanted was a hug, and like no one could even approach them or touch them. So it was really, I think, such a tough time for kids, and for me too, because I'm like, do we hug them? Are we allowed to get close to them? So they were just so emotionally raw, I think, during that period, and desperately wanting connection and to be with other people.
You know,
Now, oh,
can I
sorry.
insert here too, Kelly,
Yeah,
with
of
what
course.
I've seen happen around that piece is in the
Right.
pandemic, it made people afraid to ask others to socialize if they weren't in their bubble per se, because of the fear, obviously, of the virus. But I think this created an ongoing sort of intense fears of rejection for kids. And so that carries forward even now in that they fear of being rejected and not socializing and seems to continue on.
Mhm. Right. Right. And then so what I'm seeing a year later, whatever, sometime later, is that it's not that sort of bonding though, or wanting, they still desperately want the connection, but now we're not all in that same room together. We're not in that circle together. So I feel like the relationships have gone back to like social media and the struggles and that they're having there, and wanting to be seen and wanting to fit in with someone at some time. And I feel like the closeness, if I know that sounds strange, but the closeness of the pandemic isn't there anymore, and they sort of have broken off, but they still want that connection, they still want to be seen, they still want to fit in. So it feels like a new world in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Well, how is that consistent with what you see in your practice, Monica? In terms of,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And I think we're in, I kind of see it as almost like a loneliness epidemic now,
Mhm.
where
Yeah.
kids feel very disconnected from each other, that a lot of socialization goes on online now, which I feel like is not a way for kids to develop good communication skills, because texting each other, you can't read intent around communication or tone of voice. And then this is, you know, creates a fear or a reaction, almost like an irritable reaction for kids, or an anxiety reaction around what was the intent of that message that just came through. So that's what I'm seeing more and more in my office around socialization and communication, is that starved and desperate to connect, but at the same time, difficulty connecting.
One of the things we talked about when we were preparing for today was, that we've all seen kids out at restaurants or something, and they're all sitting with each other, but they're all on their phones. They're not talking. How does that affect them and the way they with, their interpersonal relationships?
Mhm.
Well, it really affects interpersonal relationships, and just learning the skills of good interaction, of good social, picking up on social cues, so forth and so on, in the way to connect.
Mhm.
Mhm, mhm. And I know that one thing with the theater, it will force you to connect, whether you want to or not. If you're in a group setting, you have to talk to each other, and you're in a scene together or a song together, or you're doing a dance together. So it does force a connection, which I think they like. What is interesting to me is that when the scene is over, or the dance or the song, they go right back to their phones immediately. So it's like they like that connection, but there's some sort of addictive element to the phone, because that's what they will leave the group setting. And I'll say, and I say to them all the time, like, please stay in the real world, don't go to the virtual world, because they immediately want to go back to the phone.
Mhm.
So it's funny. So I feel like if they want the connection, but
Mhm,
they're
mhm.
finding it somehow online. I don't know.
Mhm. Well, the
It's
phone is
interesting to me.
safe. They aren't necessarily being rejected constantly through the phone. It's I call it, consider it like social media is like fool's gold. It looks pretty on the outside, but there's no substance or value on the inside.
Yeah,
And I
true.
think what I've heard is that a lot of kids um, felt like they were encouraged really to use social media, particularly during the pandemic, in order to stay connected. And
Mhm.
Yeah.
then as we moved out of that,
Mhm.
it's like they're still engaging in that behavior. So how do you think social media is affecting, teens and older teens, based on what you've seen?
Based on what I've seen it as it's very disconnecting for kids, although it feels like they're connecting in some way, but it's a false sense of connection because they're not getting back what they're putting into it. They're going through liking things, posting their own pictures, getting some validation from others in that way, but there's nothing that's real in it. And I think that's the biggest thing. But what I also noticed too in social media use, especially with our older teens or young adults, is access to so much information all the time. And our brains weren't developed or created to be able to manage the amount of information that we can get now. We weren't like our brains can't manage to hear about all of the disasters in the world everywhere all the time. And so it's very hard and creates a lot of anxiety and depression for these kids around hopelessness, around the world coming to an end in some way, or all the terrible things, fear around the world, where things may not necessarily be much different from as far as catastrophes, natural disasters, wars, things like that, than it was 40 years ago. But now that they have access to all that information, it seems like it's so much more so detrimental, so hopeless. And so I'm seeing a lot of that in this generation of kids, these older teens, young adults, of I am never going to be able to live on my own. I'm not, the world is coming to an end. Everything is hopeless. A lot of that because of this amount of information that comes through.
Are you
And one thing
seeing?
oh,
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
was gonna say one thing that I see at NESPA also is they have access to events that they are being excluded from. And I
Yes.
just laugh with them. They said, back in my day, if I wasn't invited to a party, I probably didn't know. There's no way for me to know. But now with the social media, and I will see it within the company, I will see 6 kids, 7 kids who have decided to branch off and do something, and it's all over. So, if you're not one of those 6 kids, you weren't invited, you weren't included. And I think that really does play a part on depression and just their feelings of self-worth, because you just feel like, why wasn't I invited? Or you just everything is just there and in your face all the time. Where I
Feelings
don't
of
think in
rejection. Yes,
right?
feelings of rejection. Huge. Do
Yeah.
you
And I didn't see that, when I was growing up, there was no phones. So I didn't see a lot. So I think that's a challenge that they have that I didn't have. And I think that must be hard to constantly seeing events that you maybe weren't included or excluded from.
And that's where FOMO came out of, fear of missing out.
Right? Yeah,
Ah,
absolutely. Yeah.
so tell me about FOMO. Like, what's that? I've
That's
heard
the
of that.
acronym for this generation of kids, of fear of missing out, FOMO. And that is like the fear that things are happening without you either being there, being invited, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay. So it
Right.
sounds like you're seeing more anxiety, more depression with like the Gen Zs than maybe prior populations, older populations.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
What are things?
And that anxiety too created around like needing to look perfect, be involved, be well liked, be accepted everywhere, being popular. Typical things that we would worry about that in high school, our age, of being popular. But to this, it's another level because they're exposed to all the ways in which they may not be popular or being rejected, like Kelly was saying, or missing out on. So, and
Right.
how many likes your post got versus this other person that posted the same thing got so many more
Right.
likes. I therefore am not accepted or popular, and that creates more anxiety.
Yeah, and that idea of perfection, between AI and what the perfect person is supposed to look like. And most of the time that's been completely photoshopped and it's not real. It's
Yeah.
it's interesting. Um,
Cindy, can I tell you about one thing that we've been doing in our middles group?
Yes.
sort of to combat sort of or anxiety or get them in a different mind state. I don't do it with the teens, but we do it. It's been accepted in that middle group where like we'll start a discussion and we, use the red car theory when you're going to buy a red car or and then everywhere you see is the red cars, so everywhere you go, there's red cars everywhere. So we'll start the rehearsal and I tell them, I said, all right, look for the red cars today. So you're looking for what that means for us is looking for something that happened that was positive, looking for something, someone being nice to someone else or something great that happened. And at the end, we say, okay, where were the red cars? So just so they can sort of focus their attention not on, I only have 5 lines or I wasn't put in this song or et cetera, but they can say, oh, Sally was really kind to me during this dance. She helped me, with this move or so it just kind of changes their perspective and they're
Mm-hmm.
very open to that and enjoy that. And then they
Wow.
love to tell at the end what they saw that day that sort of, made them happy or increased their happiness for the moment.
So it's like a gratitude practice in a way.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And shifting your focus, right? Because we can all focus on what's not working, but I find the middle group is very receptive to that,
Mm-hmm.
which is good.
That is very cool.
Yeah.
We talk about
Um,
it in therapy as looking for the glimmers every day.
Yeah, right.
Glimmers.
Yeah, because you have to. I find myself, I have to sort of some days focus at myself because I'm looking at, everything that's not working. And sometimes if you get in that headspace, it's all you see. So I still practice that as an adult.
Yes.
so what about resources? And I know we're gonna add like a little resource thing to the end of this video, but Monica, can you talk a little bit about, I have so many people who call and ask like, we need to find a therapist for our child, and it's just like impossible to find someone. What suggestions do you have for those families?
I have a lot of suggestions actually, and it's in our area. Okay, well, just looking at it therapeutically, like following the pandemic, we had long lists, waiting lists of people trying to get into therapy. What I appreciate from the pandemic is that it brought mental health awareness to the forefront and it took away the stigma around getting mental health help, which is great. And then people started moving in droves and masses into therapy, and there have not been enough therapists to keep up with that.
Yeah.
Luckily, in this area, we do have a couple of resources that are referral services to help people find therapists or hook their child themselves or whatnot up with therapists. So one place that is a free service here in the area is the Interface through Williams James College.
Yep.
The Interface has a website. You could post that website that you can call and or email. And it's a service that will take in your insurance information, your needs, and then they will reach out to specific therapists in the area to find a match for you. And they will come up with a list of matches for you that satisfy the need that you have.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one service that's offered. Another thing I often encourage people to do is to call your insurance company and ask them if they have any therapists that are accepting new patients, new clients, and they can help out. I don't find that one goes as far as the Interface.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last resource for here on the North Shore, Massachusetts, there is what's called a private practice colloquium, which is a group of private practice therapists, a couple of hundred therapists in the area that are part of a colloquium per se. They have a website in which you can go on. There is a button to find a clinician, and you can fill out the referral form, and that will be posted in the colloquium board. And then therapists will jump on and say, I can see this person, I have room for this person, whatever that is. And then those names will be sent to you with their contact information.
Can you talk a little bit about, those are great resources and I look forward to putting those up. But can you tell us a little bit about what the difference is maybe between working with a therapist or a DBT skills group?
Okay. Okay. So DBT, a lot of people have heard that term sort of thrown around recently because a lot of the research has shown, and a lot of the movement in the past 5 years plus has been around teaching children to emotionally regulate
Mhm.
or learn how to emotionally regulate. And DBT, which is short for dialectical behavior therapy, is a type of therapy that was developed specifically for a group format that teaches specific skills. It's a very skill-based group
Mhm.
around managing emotional states, around mindfulness and awareness of what's happening in your body, in your mind, distress tolerance, like how much you can tolerate frustration and so forth, and how to manage that and then bring it down. So very good skills that everybody, I feel like, should learn and use. And what's so interesting is that many of the schools now are starting to pick up on this, and they're starting to teach some of these skills as early as kindergarten. They're starting to teach mindfulness, about calming body, around, and certain things like that. Um, but there are some DBT skills groups offered in our area, particularly for adolescents. So there's some adult ones as well.
Mhm.
A lot of times now, they're so hot and so well received. They fill up rather quickly, and they oftentimes are privately paid, sometimes between $30 to $50 a group, which for many people is a copay
Mhm.
with your insurance. But they're very, very beneficial. So the best way to access DBT skills is through a group setting, but there are clinicians also trained in DBT methods that can continue to teach and facilitate and sort of strengthen those skills. So that's something that you could put, like if you're putting out a referral, I'd like a therapist that is trained or skilled in DBT.
Right. And one of the things I understand about DBT groups is that it can be difficult to have like your insurance pay for it, right? Because it's not considered
Yeah.
therapy.
Well, it is considered therapy. It is a hot therapy upon the insurance companies. But just a lot of times, clinicians don't want to mess with insurance companies and the billing and so forth. And so they just offer them as private pay. It's much easier for a clinician.
Right. Okay. So it seems like there's a lot more of those groups kind of popping up. Do you think that's
Yes.
because of the lack of access to other child therapists or?
No, I actually think that's because that's what we're seeing the biggest problem around is anxiety, depression, mood management. And
Ah,
that these skills teach that.
mm-hmm. That's really interesting. So
So
that,
that's why we're seeing it more as like the trend in therapy is around
mm-hmm.
DBT, learning these emotional management skills. I feel like a lot of kids are, you know, what I see is a sort of a path of parents becoming more invested in parenting and trying to make it easier for children to live um, in a way that taking care or problem solving all of their problems. So they're not learning ways to tolerate negative emotions or distress. Let's make sure they don't feel that. So they
Mm-hmm.
never learn how to develop these skills that are that you need for your life.
You
So
can't,
instead of having everybody win, one person win in the game, they have everybody be the winner because then everybody would feel bad if they didn't win. You start
uh,
to see some of that. Well, sometimes just there needs to be one winner and everybody needs to learn how to deal with like that they lost.
it's like you
So,
can't, if you're on
mhm.
the honor roll, you you
Yeah,
can't,
yeah, yeah.
your child can't be acknowledged for it because it's going to make people feel bad or something. Yeah.
Yes, yes. You got to learn how to deal with disappointment, how to deal with struggles that are hard. And I think sometimes parenting goes overboard now in protecting kids around negative feelings, particularly, or feeling uncomfortable. And so they're not developing those skills, and that creates more anxiety for kids.
Yeah.
Right.
And I can say as a parent, it's so hard to watch your child be disappointed or, or
Mhm,
be
mhm.
struggling with something. So they should do a class for parents on how to,
Yes,
handle the emotions of their children. It's tough.
yes,
Yeah.
You
yes.
mean
But
we
you're
can't
right. You're
give them
totally right,
a,
Monica.
We can't give them a pain-free life. I mean, why not?
You know how bad that would be for them?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Mhm.
Kelly, I'm thinking, I know you do an improv class with teens, and when Monica was telling us about the DBT groups, I think there might be some similarities, even though it's not therapeutic. I bet there's a lot of therapeutic benefits. Can you talk a little bit about the improv classes?
Yeah, improv is our most popular program. I don't know a lot about DBT because I'm not a therapist, but I know just from child involvement, the kids really like that. And I think it just, it reiterates what I was saying before about how they have the freedom to, be different people, express different emotions. I think that's what draws them to the improv classes, so if they're in a show, they have to be that certain character that they are, where improv is complete freedom and they can come in every week and be someone different and have a different session. And it definitely does have they have to work as a group. It connects you to the group for sure. So they have that peer interaction that is positive and they support and it's about working together. That's what improv is. You have to work as a group to sort of get the story going. And I think that's what draws them to that. And it has been, I've been teaching that class for years, and it has for years been the most popular class.
So, sometimes I'm speaking with folks and they're really, really worried or concerned about their child. How do you know when it's time? This might be more for Monica, but maybe Kelly too. How do you know when it's time to consider medication for a child?
Medication particularly. Okay, yeah, I get asked this question hundreds and hundreds of times from parents because of the concerns of medication side effects and so
Right.
forth, development of brain and whatnot. So three things that I kind of look at when I'm considering whether or not it might be a good idea for a child is first, number one, is if their mood or behavior is impacting their relationship with others,
Mm.
family and or friends. That's number one sign I would say maybe you should be assessed. Number two is what is happening with their mood or behavior impacting their own self-esteem. I start to see this a lot with kids in about third grade time when they
Mm.
start to develop more self-awareness and how their behavior impacts others. So when you have a child who maybe has some ADHD going on, they start to become very self-aware that they're not being accepted by others, that they can't do things in the same way, they can't focus, they can't perform in the same way as other kids, and it really impacts their own self-esteem and then starts to become more detrimental to not be on medication that could aid in that and helping that.
Mhm.
And then the third thing that I look at with that is their behavior and or mood keeping them from doing their schoolwork, performing in their sports, art classes, their theater classes, those kinds of things. If it's impacting that, then it's time to look at that.
Right. Um, I also hear sometimes concern about medication, for kids. Like,
Mhm.
do you like what are your thoughts around when you're particularly if a child who's growing and developing,
Mhm.
do you have how do you address those concerns when a parent asks you about that?
Mhm. I think that's when you look at cost benefit. Is
Mm.
it better for them to be successful, developing their confidence in their ability to perform or manage their moods or make friends or those kinds of things over potential side effects of medications? And that's when you balance that out. Is it worth it or not?
Hmm. Okay.
How bad is the problem?
How about like what kind of interventions are being used in therapy for kids and teens?
This is pretty specific to the need the child has. So if we're looking at something like mood management, like we've been talking about a lot, anxiety, depression, those kinds of things, in teens particularly, DBT is often referred as something that's, sort of the gold standard right now of helping kids learn how to manage mood states. we're looking at a child with ADHD symptoms and it's really affecting their ability to perform or in school and whatnot, there are services and or therapy around executive functioning skills and building that. One particular website that I've had a lot of success with is Beyond Book Smart, which
Hmm,
is a company that their main focus is executive functioning skills and teaching children executive functioning skills.
interesting.
And so that oftentimes I'll refer my ADHD clients that are really struggling with those areas to that place. Um, then if we're looking at something like OCD, like anxiety and or repetitive rituals and behaviors that get in the way, intense school anxiety or
Hmm.
refusal, things like that. One of the biggest types of treatment for that is what they call ERP, or emotional response prevention. This helps like gently ease a child into being able to do the things that are very anxiety provoking for a kid. So a therapist that's skilled in that area or understands those techniques would be helpful for that.
Sort of like
Uh,
exposure,
yeah, like an exposure therapy. Yep.
yeah, wow,
Mhm.
interesting.
And then if we're looking at trauma, like the gold standard for trauma is EMDR or brain spotting. And these are techniques that are utilized to help build neural networks and process trauma in those children who have experienced traumatic um, life events.
So these are all great resources. Kelly,
And something like if they're putting out a referral to any of those like online referral systems that we talked about, there are things that they could that oftentimes therapists will come to them that have these boxes checked of can do DBT, can do EMDR, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy is often talked about as another big treatment focus for kids that are experiencing a lot of anxiety, particularly.
okay, this is great.
Mhm.
Kelly, I'm also wondering if when do you recommend if someone's looking to have their child get into a summer program, like how soon do they need to get signed up or like know where their kid's going to be going?
Right. It seems to every year get earlier and earlier for getting your kids into programs, especially ones that are popular. We open up our summer programs in January, and by February they're pretty full already. So parents are way ahead, having to be, and especially with summer, maybe not so much year round, but I always feel like I have to be a season ahead of the parents with just having, all of our fall is planned out because they want to register and they want to have everything set ahead of time. So earlier is better for
And
sure.
do you have any suggestions? Let's say, there's a family, they might want to explore having their child get into a theater program. How do they go about finding one that's going to be a good fit for their child?
Yeah, I think that different programs have different objectives. So you have to figure out what is it you want your child to get from the program. So a lot of arts programs are based on making children, like a child star or getting into the business of, professionally becoming a professional actor. We focus more on the whole child, and we're more interested in their growth as like a person, a well-rounded experience more than training for professional theater. So I think that the first step is to define what the goal is. What do you want your child to receive from the program?
Mhm.
And then from there, I mean, there's abundance of arts organizations all throughout the towns. So there's some that just do art. There's some like us that do all the disciplines. Some just do theater. So I think you just have to sit down with your child, and I think it's great for them to try all of the arts. If they have an interest in the arts, why not see if they like drawing or if they find enjoyment from acting. Not all kids like to be this in the spotlight or singing solos. Some really do. So I guess it's really talking to the child and finding out what excites them. Maybe it's dance that they really love, and I think all the arts are some sort of expression that it's really healthy and it gets their creativity out.
Excellent. Well, speaking of, well, before I jump to this, is there anything else that we haven't talked about that we should touch upon, to help families who have kids that, are really struggling from your point of view? Like, what resources might anything else you can think of?
For me?
Or both of you?
Oh. One thing I was thinking of, sometimes we will have children who are, struggling with different issues or problems. And a lot of times I'll have parents just contact me and say, this is my child, this is what's happening with them. We had a few weeks ago, we had a child that was just painfully introverted and was struggling with making friends and connections. So I would, just tell the parents to reach out to the organization if they have an interest. We always have, allow a kid to come in to try a class. You don't have to sign up for, 3-week summer program. You can just come in for the day and get a sense of what the organization is like, try a class, with no obligation. And I think that gives the child a sense of what they're getting themselves into and eases anxiety about joining. So I would definitely have the parents reach out to the organization and get a sense of it that way. Try it out, and try out all different types.
I feel like a lot of programs have that option of being able to just sort of test it to see if it feels like a match.
Definitely, especially if there's anxiety around the activity, the kids really appreciate that.
Yes.
Excellent. All right. Well, I really want to thank you both for making the time to share your wealth of information, working with kids. This is going to be really helpful to people. And, we in Peridot Family Law, we have these quarterly art exhibits in our offices, and you can sort of see them, the most recent exhibit behind me. And I just wanted to show some of the pictures because they're of children, and they are by Randy Friendlook, and she is amazing. And I'm just going to pull up one or two of her pictures.
Beautiful.
All right. So thank you so much. Oh, it looks like there is a question. Oh, there's a question about, are there any book recommendations that you would have for
Is
families?
there a more specific about what?
So I think it could be about, kids who are maybe struggling emotionally. I think it could be around that particular issue. It just, that's the question.
One of the books I really like for a lot of kids in this generation in general is Anxious Kids, Anxious Parents by Lynn Lyons. I feel like that's an excellent book that talks about anxiety, if that's an issue, which I think maybe 95% of our kids are dealing with these days. I do like that book. If we're looking at more of like the effects of social media and so forth on kids, one of my favorite books on that is called Generation Z Unfiltered.
Ooh.
Is really good book about the effects of what's like happening, how kids are perceiving the world, and the effects on the brain.
That's fantastic. Well, you both shared so many amazing resources. I am very, very grateful, and I know that the families who watch this will be as well. So I want to thank you both again, and enjoy the rest of this wonderful July hot summer day. We'll see you next time.
Great.
Thank you, Cindy.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.